Wife's father had his fist twisted in Isaiah Dwell's collar before the graduation music even faded. The old man dragged him sideways through a row of pressed suits and silk dresses, while phones lifted like birds startled from grass. Isaiah did not swing back. He did not shout. He only kept one hand over the inside pocket of his jacket, where a folded document rested against his heart like a secret pulse. His wife Lalana sat frozen in the front row with her mouth pressed in and her eyes turned down. She did not stand for him. She did not touch her father's arm. In the seat that should have belonged to Isaiah sat Vernon Kaid, a polished developer with a gold watch, a donor smile, and one hand draped comfortably across the empty space beside Alana. It was their son's graduation day at Kingsley State, an old black university built on discipline, memory, and generations of sacrifice. Families had come dressed in joy. Grandmothers wore white gloves. Little boys tugged at clip-on ties. And right there in the middle of all that pride, a black man who had spent half his life making sure other people's lights stayed on was being dragged out like he had no right to witness his own child rise. Leonard Price, Alana's father, did not whisper when he did it. Men like Leonard never whispered when power was performing. "Back row," he said, loud enough for strangers to turn. "Seats up here are for people who matter today." Isaiah straightened when Leonard let go. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at the front row once. Only once, and his gaze stopped on Alana. She gave him a glance no longer than a blink, then lowered her eyes to the graduation program in her lap as if paper could protect her from what she had just allowed. Nobody there knew what had happened 2 hours earlier in a law office downtown. Nobody knew that, before breakfast, Isaiah had signed papers that transferred to him a freight empire, 3 warehouses, 2 apartment buildings, and 400 acres of land spreading east of Atlanta like a second horizon. Nobody knew the man being dismissed from the front row now held the one signature that could stop or save half the plan. Leonard Price had spent 3 years building. That was the thing about Isaiah. People never knew what he carried because he never carried it loudly. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, dark-skinned, and usually seen in work boots with maintenance keys at his hip. Men looked at the ring of keys and decided that was the loudest thing about him. They never looked long enough to see the steadiness in his face, the trained silence, the kind of self-command black men often learn when the world mistakes restraint for weakness and labor for smallness. He had learned that silence from his mother, Bernice Dwell. Bernice cleaned houses on the north side for 23 years and came home each night with swollen feet and a back that refused to complain. She taught Isaiah how to endure being underestimated without letting it hollow him out. She used to tell him, "Baby, some folks can only measure a man by where they stand. Let God give you your height." Bernice died 6 weeks before the graduation, pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel. Isaiah buried her on a Thursday, then went back to work Monday because the mortgage was due and grief did not stop utility bills from arriving in black neighborhoods with final notices printed in red. He had gone home after the funeral and found Alana at the kitchen island discussing centerpiece colors with her father. She told him she was sorry without rising from the stool. Leonard nodded at him, like a man acknowledging the delivery of furniture. Isaiah had gone upstairs, sat in the dirt, and understood for the first time that grief did not always reveal who loved you. Sometimes it only reveals who had already left. Alana had not always been like that. In the beginning, she had laughed from the center of herself. She had loved Isaiah when they were both young enough to think struggle was a season and not a climate. But years passed, and class did what race alone could not. It divided black people inside the same room. Leonard had money, office, influence, and a taste for calling it standards. Isaiah had grease on his cuffs, overtime on his back, and dignity that made no noise. Lena never forgave his daughter for marrying a maintenance man. Not because Isaiah was cruel, not because he was lazy. Because Isaiah represented a kind of black man. Leonard had spent his career running away from honest, working class, unadorned. A man who could not be displayed to donors, only respected by decent people. And Leonard had long mistaken the first thing for the second. Their son Micah saw it all long before either parent admitted it. Micah was 22, graduating with honors in civil engineering, and carried his father's quiet face with his mother's sharp eyes. He had watched family dinners turn into auditions for Vernon Cade's approval. He had watched Leonard talk over Isaiah, then ask Vernon to say grace. He had watched his mother start smiling toward another future while his father kept paying for the present. Then the letter came. It arrived by certified mail on a gray Tuesday morning while the house still smelled like toast and old coffee. Isaiah opened it, alone at the kitchen table. The law firm's name meant nothing to him at first. The second page meant everything. His great-uncle Solomon Dwell had died in Savannah at 8. Solomon had been one of those older black men people called ordinary because they never asked the right questions. He had driven freight through the South for 30 years, bought land nobody wanted, leased warehouses near roads nobody believed in, and built his company so quietly even his family only knew fragments. He left no wife, no children, and only one clear instruction in his will. Everything went to Isaiah, not split, not delayed, not debated. Everything. The letter listed numbers that looked unreal under kitchen light. 42% controlling interest in Dwell Freight Systems. 400 acres in a logistics corridor east of Atlanta. To lease apartment buildings, liquid accounts, mineral rights under part of the land. The estimated value was just above $9 million and still climbing. Inside the envelope was a smaller folded card with Solomon's handwriting, thick and patient, across the paper. It said, "You never begged to be seen. That is why I trust you with sight." Isaiah read that line until the room went still around him. He heard Bernice's sea voice in it. He heard all the Sundays Solomon had called just to ask if Micah was eating well and whether Isaiah was sleeping enough. Solomon had never spoken about wealth. He had spoken about character. Isaiah understood now that silence could be inheritance too. The earliest signing appointment was the morning of Micah's graduation. Isaiah took it. He told nobody. Not Alana, not Micah, not even his closest friend from work. It was not secrecy born of pride. It was caution born of having spent too many years around people who only honored men after money translated them. So while Alana was getting her hair done and Leonard was instructing ushers as if he owned the university, Isaiah drove downtown in his good charcoal suit. He sat across from a black woman named Attorney Baines in an office lined with walnut shelves and signed each transfer page in a steady hand. When she finished, she stood and shook his hand with both of hers. "Mr. Dwell," she said, "your uncle believed you would do more than profit. He believed you would protect." Isaiah placed the folded card in his inside pocket. Then he drove straight to the campus, where Leonard Price's fingers found his collar. He took the back row because some humiliations expose more than they wound. He wanted to see who people became when they thought he had nothing left to lose. He sat alone beneath a balcony fan that clicked every 6 seconds. When Micah's name was called, Isaiah stood and clapped with both hands, high and strong. The way black fathers clap when love has had to survive quiet. Micah looked up from the stage and found him. Their eyes met across rows of satin and cameras. In that instant, Micah understood what nobody else did. His father was not shrinking back there. He was standing apart. After the ceremony, Families poured toward the alumni hall for the president's luncheon. Leonard moved through the crowd like the event had been staged in his honor. Vernon kept one palm at the center of Alana's back. Isaiah would have left quietly if Micah had not come jogging down the lawn in his gown and caught him near the steps. "You're coming inside," Micah said. Isaiah looked at his son's face, still bright from the ceremony, still shadowed by what he had seen. "This one ain't my room today," he said. Micah's jaw tightened. "Any room I walk into on this campus is your room first. You kept me here." That was enough. Isaiah went in. The alumni hall gleamed with polished wood and donor plaques. Portraits of dead presidents stared down from paneled walls, while waiters moved under chandeliers with silver pitchers of sweet tea. At the front, a long easel held renderings of a future innovation district that Leonard and Vernon had spent months praising. New labs, luxury housing, retail space, words like progress and revitalization floated over drawings of neighborhoods that already had people living in them. Isaiah knew that map the second he saw it. The curve of the service road, the old rail cut, the warehouse block along the creek. Leonard's grand project was centered on land Isaiah now owned. Before he could say a word, the room shuddered. There was a snap overhead, then a sharp burst from the back wall. One of the aging electrical panels behind the banquet partition flashed white and threw sparks across the drapes. Women screamed. A serveur dropped a tray. Smoke rolled up fast and dark. And the first thing powerful people do in sudden danger is look for someone they have always assumed will know what to do. Isaiah was already moving. He grabbed the nearest extinguisher before anyone else had fully stood. He shouted for the room to clear through the west doors. Voice low but carrying the kind of command built from years of real emergencies instead of boardroom rehearsals, he pulled the alarm, cut across the service corridor, and killed the auxiliary breaker with a gloved hand from the emergency box he knew by memory. When a panicked guest slipped near the steps, Isaiah caught her before her head hit marble. When Leonard froze in the smoke, coughing, Isaiah turned back and steered him out too. The whole evacuation took less than 2 minutes. Outside on the lawn, people stood in clusters, breathing hard and staring at Isaiah like the man in the maintenance boots had suddenly stepped through a hidden door. Vernon's expensive calm was gone. Leonard's face was gray under his aftershave. Alana looked at Isaiah with something close to fear, not because he had changed, but because she was seeing how much she had stopped seeing. Then Attorney Baines arrived. She crossed the lawn with a leather folder in hand, flanked by university counsel and 2 stunned real estate attorneys. She went straight to Isaiah while half the donors watched. "Mr. Dwell," she said clearly, "I've been trying to reach you. There are acquisition documents tied to your East Corridor properties. We need your response before anyone proceeds." Silence hit harder than the smoke had. Vernon's chin lifted a fraction, then dropped. Leonard looked from the lawyer to Isaiah as if language itself had betrayed him. Alana pressed one hand to her throat. Micah stood very still beside his father in cap and gown, the tassels shifting in the breeze. "The East Corridor?" Lena asked, though his voice already knew. Attorney Baines turned with professional calm. "The Dwell freight parcels. Mr. Isaiah Dwell is the controlling owner as of this morning. You could feel the room recalculate, not just the money, the hierarchy, the assumptions, the casual brutality that had walked so confidently when it believed it would never be answered." Vernon stepped forward first, because men like Vernon always think charm is quicker than shame. "Mr. Dwell," he said, smiling, a smile that had never reached his own eyes, "I believe we've been trying to build something extraordinary on your property." Isaiah studied the glossy plans of glass towers rising where black families had lived for generations, then looked Vernon in the eye and said, "Not on my mother's block." In that moment, everything changed. The fight was never just about money. It was about history redlining, displacement, and systems that erased black communities while calling it progress. Years earlier, Isaiah had been an engineering student at Kingsley State, forced to drop out when his mother fell ill. He spent decades working maintenance at the same university that never recognized his unfinished potential. When Dr. Monroe approached him, he told her the truth about sacrifice, class, and being invisible in places built on his labor. She listened, truly listened, and asked what was at stake. The answer: hundreds of homes, a church, and a community on the brink of being erased. Then Leonard came not as a powerful official, but as a man facing his failure. He admitted his wrongs, but Isaiah demanded more than words. He demanded action, cancel the permits, expose corruption, and publicly admit the truth. At the community hearing, Leonard did exactly that. No excuses, no politics, just accountability. When Vernon tried to regain control, Isaiah stood and spoke from lived experience. Then he made his move, announcing the Dwell Community Trust, shifting power back to the people and redefining what true development meant. Isaiah refused to sell the land, instead placing it into a community trust led by residents, businesses, and students. The project funded home repairs, apprenticeships, and scholarships in Bernice Dwell's name, transforming the room from tension into hope. Dr. Monroe publicly committed university support, ensuring the plan could not be undone. Vernon realized he had lost not by force, but by vision. Alana, filled with regret, finally understood Isaiah's worth, though their marriage ended quietly. Isaiah remained fair, refusing to misuse power. Leonard honored his promise through steady actions, exposing corruption and supporting the community. Meanwhile, Kingsley State launched programs for workers to return to education. Isaiah among the first to enroll. A year later, the renovated warehouse reopened as the Bernice Dwell Center, offering education, business support, and opportunity. Standing before the crowd, Isaiah spoke about being underestimated not as weakness, but as hidden strength. He dedicated the center to those forced to sacrifice their dreams. In the end, Isaiah's journey wasn't about wealth, but impact. He turned disrespect into purpose, building something lasting. His message remained clear: when the world fails to recognize your worth, build something that makes it impossible to ignore.